If you've got an ROG Ally, I'm sure you love it just as much as I do. And we all know the ROG Ally X is coming out or is now out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for anybody that owns an ROG Ally. It just means that some of the accessories for it start getting cheaper. Kind of like this ROG gaming charger dock that we're going to be taking a look at today. Hey everybody, it's Chris from Family Geekery, and today I'm going to be checking out this ROG gaming charger dock. And the only reason why I'm looking at this, a couple different reasons. One, it just became half price just about everywhere it's sold, so that's not a bad deal. We're looking at like 30 bucks for a 65 watt charger, and that by itself is a pretty good deal, and it's got obviously a lot more features than that. And the other thing is I heard it comes with a pretty decent cable inside here, so I'm looking forward to checking that out. So basically what we got here is we got a charger that's going to charge our ROG Ally, but it's also a dock because it's got an HDMI port and it's got a USB port. So this thing over the USB-C cable that's connected to your ROG Ally, you're going to be able to get video out of it, and you're going to be able to put some kind of peripheral into it, whether it's a thumb drive or a mouse and keyboard or a controller, and all in a small little package. Now I've got lots of other types of docks, like this type of dock that you just plug in USB-C cable to the top, and you've got your HDMI and USB-C and the power pass-through and everything on there. And that's nice, but this does require power to be plugged into it. This thing's just going to plug right into the wall, and it's going to do everything over one cable for you. So let's go ahead and open this box up and see what we got. Alright, so in the box we got the charger dock thing itself. We've got a really nice braided cable, and this thing looks really long. And then we've got way too much paper for what this thing needs. I'm not going to probably read through much of that, but on the box it does have some specs that are important to understand here, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these specs. It talks about the 65 watts and how that works. 65 watts is going to be good to go if you're going just USB-C out of the charger into your ROG Ally, and that's it. So that's going to use power delivery all the way up to 20 volts at 3¼ amps. So that's your 65 watts. Now if you have something plugged into the USB-A port also, that USB-A port is capable of 5 watts, so that's going to take away some of the 5 watts from the 65, so you'll get a maximum of 60 watts out of the USB-C port. Still not a bad deal for a tiny little charger like this to get 65 watts out. You'd be paying easily 30 bucks for a decent quality 65 watt power delivery charger if you're just getting one by itself, let alone a really nice cable and of course the dock capabilities. Now as far as the HDMI goes, it's HDMI 2.0. It's capable of up to 4K output resolution, which you may be getting out of some of the games that you're running on your ROG Ally, but I'm guessing a lot of it would be probably 1080p going to your monitor, so that HDMI 2.0 is going to be plenty strong. Now on the charger itself, it's got a nice little fold out 2-prong here, which is nice so that when you carry it, it doesn't have the prong sticking out of it, so it is nice and compact. And like I said, this cable, this is one of the reasons why I got it. It's got a nice little rubber cable keeper here. It's got to be every bit of 6 feet long, and I'm going to test it to see if it'll do 100 watts. It's not labeled on here. It is labeled as DP4K, but it doesn't have a power rating, I don't think, listed anywhere on here. So I do have a 100 watt device I'll test it on, but it's still going to be plenty strong for the 65 watts going to the ROG Ally. And it's nice that since this plugs into the wall here, you're not going to have this thing have to be so close to the wall. You can be, 6 feet away. So let's go ahead and get this thing plugged in and get a little monitor out here and see if we can make it all work. Alright, so I got it all wired up. I've got this one single cable here that came with it coming from the ROG Ally, and that's going into the dock, which is not on the screen, but it's plugged into the wall. Also plugged into that dock is an HDMI cable, which is plugged into obviously this monitor here, giving me the HDMI output. And also plugged into the dock, I've got a wired controller here, just a Xbox controller that I've plugged a cable right into that dock just to test out that USB 2.0, and it seems to be working just perfectly. The controls on the front face here are still working on the ROG Ally itself, but the screen is blanked out while it's plugged into the dock. Now if you want to get back to playing on the screen itself, just unplug the cable. Obviously everything's going to disappear from the screen here. Your controls aren't going to work on your Xbox controller, but then everything's going to be back to normal here on the ROG Ally. So this is a portable way that you can maybe easily plug into a hotel TV, take it on the road with you, maybe use a portable monitor, maybe use a different controller, or even at home you can plug this in and just play it in desktop mode. Now I did do some testing on the cable and the charger itself. The charger did show up as a 65 watt charger, but for some reason the cable was maxing out on most of the tests that I did at about 60 watts. Now that doesn't mean it's not going to have enough power to power the ROG Ally from the dock. It just means that it's probably not going to make it all the way up to 100 watts for something like a MacBook Pro. But that's not the fault of the cable. It never advertised itself as being a 100 watt cable. I was just hoping that it was. Now there's not much else to test on a simple device like this. Plug it into the ROG Ally, plug it into your TV, and it just works. So the next thing I'm going to do is plug something else into this thing and see if the dock works for other devices. Alright, so the next thing I tested out here is just a Nintendo Switch, and while it does deliver power, and it does work over USB, I've got a USB controller, a really cheap one, plugged into that USB port, and it's going crazy because it's got some massive drift on the stick, but it does work nonetheless. So you can use this thing as a USB dock and a power supply for a Switch, but I'm not getting any video coming over to the monitor here. And I'm guessing there is some markings on here that said DP 4K, so it may be that this is just working over the DisplayPort protocol, and it's not true HDMI. But if you just need a way to charge your Switch, and maybe plug in a controller to it, then this will definitely work. Let's try something else. Alright, scratch what I just said. I just noticed that they did have a firmware version update for that charger, which is kind of funny, because you think of it's just a charger, but it's actually a docking station, so they did have a firmware update on the website. I will leave a link to that update down below. They call it the one-click installer, and it was pretty quick, pretty easy, and it did add compatibility for the Nintendo Switch. So here we are with the Nintendo Switch outputting to our TV now. So let's try something else. Alright, so next thing I wanted to do is try out a MacBook Pro, and I just grabbed a 2018 model that's got USB-C ports on it. And I plugged in the one USB-C port coming from the dock, and it just works. So the HDMI cable is still going to the monitor. I've got mouse control, keyboard control, and everything just works. So plug and play on a Mac device. Alright, next up we got a Windows laptop, and this is just a Huawei MateBook X I use for a lot of tests here whenever I need a USB-C output. And again, just one cable in, it's charging, the video works. Everything works. Now, as you're getting into bigger and bigger laptops, you got to remember this thing only puts out 65 watts, so you probably don't want to plug a gaming laptop into this dock. But for something like a thin book like this, it's going to work just fine. What's next? Alright, next up, I've got the Steam Deck, which is probably the most popular handheld PC right now, and probably the biggest competitor to the ROG Ally, and plugged it in, and it just worked. Now, you're not seeing it on the screen here, because for whatever reason I couldn't get it to come up on this portable monitor, but when I plugged it into my main computer monitor, it just worked just fine. So you can't see it, but I can see it, and it's working beautifully. Alright, so bringing it all the way back to where we started here with the ROG Ally, the device that it was actually intended to work with, and I'm going to summarize by saying that this little tiny charging dock thing is super portable and super convenient. We tested it out on all kinds of things, computers, handheld gaming PCs, and everything seemed to work. Now I've tested devices like this, single little charging blocks that have the USB and the HDMI on it for the Nintendo Switch before, but the ones I've tested in the past, in fact here's one right on my shelf right here, I don't believe this was 65 watts out. So to get the full 65 watts into your ROG Ally, having this one that's made by Asus is a perfect fit. And the fact that it works with all those other devices, that's just bonus. So if you don't have one and you find one on sale, like I said, I got mine for like 30 bucks at Best Buy. I think it's a heck of a deal. Be sure to check out the firmware update. Again, I'll link that down in the description below. Download the zip file, open it up. There's instructions right in there. Double click on the exe file and hook up your USB-C port to your computer and just click and it updates that firmware. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this one. I hope you got something out of it. I hope I answered all your questions. If so, I appreciate a thumbs up. If you have any more questions that I didn't cover in this video, feel free to drop those down in the comments below and I'll answer anything I can. Go ahead and check out the rest of the channel for all kinds of geeky stuff. I thank you as always for watching, and until next time, peace out and geek out.